I stopped checking my father's voicemails the winter I learned that silence weighs more than stone. The cedar box sat on my passenger seat for 4 hours, and by the time I pulled up to the house on Mercer Drive, the December cold had made the wood contract just enough that the hinges no longer sat flush. I could hear the faint creak when I lifted it. My hands were steady. That should have told me something. Claire Donovan, 33, structural engineer, drove an F-250 with 200,000 miles and a film of job site dust on the dashboard that I'd stopped trying to remove around the same time I stopped trying to make my mother understand what I did for a living. The house looked the same as it always did. Ryan's leased Tesla in the driveway, polished to a mirror shine. My mother already at the door before my boots hit the walkway. Her eyes moved in order: flannel shirt, work boots, box. You planning to stand on your own eventually? Not hello, not Merry Christmas. The thing about my mother is that she doesn't open conversations, she continues them from arguments you didn't know you were having. I held the box with both hands. Inside was something I'd built in my grandfather's workshop, the one behind the garage that no one used anymore except me. 9 hours of cutting and sanding and joining dovetails the way he'd taught me when I was 17, before the cancer, before the silence that followed him like a second shadow. Set it with the others, she said, waving toward the dining room. We'll do gifts later. Lupe, the box, cedar and brass, handmade, carrying something my mother would need more than anything in the world, if she ever bothered to open it. Loop B, my grandfather's workshop, the one my mother had labeled with masking tape, throw out. Loop C, the mistake I made, the one I've been carrying for 3 years and haven't said aloud, the reason I kept coming back. The sideboard was lined with framed photographs: Ryan graduating summa cum laude, Ryan and Jenna at their wedding, Ryan shaking hands with someone important at a conference I'd never heard of. There was one photo of me, 8th grade, half hidden behind a ceramic angel my mother bought at a craft fair. I set the box down next to Ryan's face and turned back toward the kitchen. I build things, Mum. The boots are intentional. She didn't hear me, or she did, and it didn't register as the kind of sentence that required a response. By 5 o'clock, the house was full. Aunt Diane arrived first, loud, perfumed. Carrying a casserole, she announced the ingredients to 3 separate people, then Uncle Mark, then cousins, then Kara, who was 26 and the only person in the family who texted me back without needing something. The dining room had been set with the good china, 12 seats, cloth napkins, candles and holders that only came out twice a year. At the far end, against the wall, a folding chair, metal frame, vinyl seat, a paper plate on the armrest. Claire, you're over there. My mother pointed without looking up from the centerpiece she was adjusting for the 3rd time. I looked at the chair. I looked at the table. Ryan and Jenna had place cards at the head, next to my parents. I'm 33. Freeloaders eat at the kids' table. She said it like a punchline. Aunt Diane laughed on cue. 12 people heard it. No one corrected her. I reached into my coat pocket. My fingers found the brass torpedo level my grandfather had carried every day for 40 years, 4 inches long, worn smooth, still perfectly calibrated. He'd given it to me the day I told him I wanted to build things, and he'd looked at me the way no one in this house had looked at me since. Guess we're good, I said. Kara appeared beside me with her own plate. She pulled a regular chair from the hallway and set it next to the folding one without asking permission. Solidarity, she said, and sat down. Before I could respond, my father tapped his glass. Got some news. He stood at the head of the table with his shoulders back and his chin elevated, the posture of a man who wanted to be believed before he said anything worth believing. Some of you know I've been in talks with a major developer. His voice carried the practiced cadence of someone who'd rehearsed this in the mirror. Well, it's official. Hartwell Industries, the Langford Bridge project, biggest infrastructure build this county's seen in a decade, and David Donovan's going to be part of it. He didn't say how, he didn't say in what capacity, but I knew. Everyone at that table had heard about the Langford Bridge. It had been on the news for months: pedestrian bridge and civic pavilion spanning the Crooked River, connecting downtown to the industrial corridor. My father had been chasing a subcontractor slot since August. What he didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was whose name sat on every sheet of the structural drawings, whose firm had won the engineering contract 2 years ago against 14 competitors. The table clapped. My mother beamed. Ryan raised his glass. Now that's real work, my mother said, and her eyes flicked toward me when she said it. I picked up my fork. Big project, Dad, hope you're working with the right people. He frowned, unsure if I'd just complimented or warned him. Then Aunt Diane asked about dessert, and the moment dissolved. I ate my turkey from the folding chair, watched the candles flicker on the table I wasn't allowed to join, thought about the cedar box on the sideboard and what it would mean when they finally opened it. If they opened it. Aunt Diane cornered me in the kitchen while I refilled my water. Claire, still doing the computer thing? Structural engineering. Right, from home, though? I have an office, and sites. She tilted her head the way people do when they've already decided you're not worth the follow-up question. Must be nice not having to commute. Jenna drifted in behind her, reaching for the wine. Saves on gas, at least. They both laughed. I'd stopped correcting people 3 years ago. The first time I mentioned winning a contract, my mother changed the subject to Ryan's promotion. The second time, I showed my father a photo of a medical center my firm had completed in Westfield. He said, "That's nice, honey," and asked someone to pass the rolls. The third time, I tried to explain what a structural engineer actually does, and my mother cut me off mid-sentence. If it's so impressive, why can't you even keep a husband? So I stopped. Not because I was ashamed, I stopped because repeating yourself to people who've already written your ending is a specific kind of exhaustion, and I got tired of volunteering for it. My mother appeared in the doorway. Claire, Diane asked you a question. She asked if I work from home. The answer is sometimes. She can't even tell us where she works. My mother shook her head at Diane, performing exasperation. That should tell you everything. It told them exactly what they wanted to hear. That was the entire point. After dinner, while the kids played in the den and the adults settled into the living room with coffee, my mother brought up Colin. She didn't use his name, she never did anymore, she called him the one who left. I saw his mother at the market last week, loud enough for everyone. She looked good, said Colin's doing well in Seattle, new job, new girlfriend. Pause, stir the coffee. I told her we were glad he found someone more stable. Every adult in that room heard it. The truth about my divorce was ordinary and unremarkable. Colin got a job offer in Washington. I had a business in Ohio. We loved each other, and we let each other go. No betrayal, no courtroom drama. We signed the papers on a Tuesday, and he helped me move a bookshelf the following Saturday. But my mother had turned it into evidence. Evidence that I couldn't hold a life together. Evidence that something was fundamentally wrong with me. Even a good man couldn't stay, she said, sipping her coffee. At some point, you have to ask yourself what the common denominator is. The room went quiet. I could feel the secondhand embarrassment radiating off Uncle Mark's wife. Then Ryan said, "Mom, come on, it's Christmas." He didn't look at me when he said it, but he said it, and it was enough to redirect the conversation. I filed it away. I stood at the kitchen sink washing a serving dish that didn't need washing because I needed 2 minutes alone. Here's the thing about being the family disappointment, it doesn't matter how much you've built if the people who named you never look up long enough to see it. You become the story they tell, and if you let them tell it long enough, it starts to feel true. I'd driven 4 hours that morning with a cedar box on the passenger seat because I'd made a decision 3 weeks earlier. One more chance, one clean, quiet chance. Not a speech, not a confrontation, just the truth, in a box, offered with both hands. If they took it, I'd know they could still surprise me. If they didn't, if they set it aside, mocked it, told me to leave, then I'd know something else. I'd know I'd been asking the wrong people for permission my entire adult life. I looked through the doorway at the sideboard. The cedar box sat exactly where I'd placed it 4 hours ago. No one had touched it, no one had asked about it. It was invisible. The same way I was. Ryan held court for the next half hour, he always did. He had the gift of sounding important even when he was saying nothing, a skill our mother rewarded and I'd never learned. The Tesla's just a lease, might buy it out. Q4 was insane. Jenna and I are looking at a boat for the summer, nothing crazy, just a 30-footer. My mother glowed, "That's my boy." Jenna leaned in with her own announcement, "And we're getting everyone into the Langford dedication gala on New Year's. Black tie, the mayor, the whole thing. I've got a connection." Aunt Diane gasped. Uncle Mark nodded approvingly. My father practically vibrated. "That gala's invite only. You really have a way in?" "Working on it," Jenna said, smiling like she'd already delivered. I watched Ryan while everyone else watched Jenna. His hand on his whiskey glass was shaking, just barely, just enough. He switched the glass to his other hand and tucked the first into his pocket. When Jenna mentioned the boat, something tightened around his eyes. I know that look, I've worn it. It's the look of someone whose math doesn't add up and who can't figure out how to tell the table. Nobody else noticed. My mother was too busy beaming. My father was already mentally rehearsing his entrance at the gala. Aunt Diane was asking Jenna what to wear. "Presents next," my mother said, clapping her hands. "Let's open Ryan's first." The cedar box sat on the sideboard. It had been there 5 hours. I wondered if it would make it to 6. Ryan's gift to our parents was a high-end massage device. My mother held it up like she'd won something. My father read the box twice, top of the line. The room applauded as if he'd cured something. Then someone said, "What about Claire's?" The room went quiet for a second, the kind of quiet that happens when people remember you exist. Oh, my mother looked at the sideboard, right, the little box. She didn't get up, she pointed. "Claire, hand it here." I walked over, picked up the cedar box. I'd spent 9 hours building it, chosen the wood from a lumber yard in Granville, the same yard my grandfather used to take me to when I was a kid, dovetailed the corners the way he taught me. The hinges were hand-forged brass I'd ordered from a craftsman in Vermont. I set it on the table in front of her. She picked it up, turned it over, felt the weight. Light. She shook it gently, something shifted inside. She wrinkled her nose. Handmade. The way someone might say second-hand. She set it back down without opening it. "We'll get to it later. It's a gift, Mum, you could open it. Homemade is sweet, honey, it's not a real present." She pushed it toward the center of the table, next to the wrapping paper pile. Then she turned to Jenna. "Tell me more about this gala." The cedar box sat in a pile of torn ribbon. Nobody opened it, nobody asked what was inside. I went back to the folding chair and sat down. Kara put her hand on my arm and squeezed once, hard. After presents, the questions started. They always did. It was the part of the evening where the family took turns examining the soft parts of my life, looking for confirmation of what they already believed. "Do you own your place yet, Aunt Diane?" "I rent." "Still, Uncle Mark?" "It's a good rental." "Do you at least have health insurance?" My mother, from across the room. "Yes." "Through who?" "You don't have an employer." "Through my company." "Your company?" She said it the way you'd say your imaginary friend. "What is it you actually do, Claire?" That was Jenna, leaning against the doorframe with her wine. She asked it every year. Every year, she forgot the answer. "I design structures, buildings, bridges." "On a computer?" "On a computer, yes, and on-site." "Sounds lonely." It wasn't lonely, it was precise and physical and sometimes beautiful, but I wasn't going to describe standing on a bridge deck at sunrise, watching concrete cure to a woman who just called Elise Tesla an accomplishment. Every answer I gave was calm, factual, short. Every answer they heard was evasive. The gap between what I said and what they understood was the entire problem. My father joined from the hallway, bourbon in hand. "The thing is, Claire, if your work was real, people would know about it. Ryan's clients take him to dinner, his name's on things. My name is on things, too, Dad." "On what? Your little laptop?" My mother laughed. My father smiled, pleased with himself. I let it pass. I was watching them build their case for what was coming, and I wanted them to finish before I showed them mine. The television in the living room was on. It was always on at my parents' house, like a third family member nobody acknowledged. During a lull in conversation, the local news anchor's voice cut through. "Langford Bridge and Civic Pavilion set to open with a dedication gala on New Year's Eve. The project, hailed as the largest public infrastructure investment in the county in over a decade, has drawn national attention for its innovative design." The screen showed an aerial rendering of the bridge. My bridge. The sweeping pedestrian walkway, the observation platform, the pavilion where the old industrial waterfront used to be. They showed the cranes on site, the Civic logo, the project partners listed along the bottom. My father pointed at the screen. That right there, that's the project I've been telling you about." "The Langford thing?" Uncle Mark said. "Hartwell Industries, they're the owners. I've been in talks with their people since September, subcontractor slot for the finishing work. It's going to put me back on the map." He said it with the confidence of a man who didn't know he was standing in someone else's building. "Big leagues," he said, glancing at me, "nothing your little laptop job would touch." The bridge filled the screen. My bridge. The one I'd spent 14 months designing, 2 years building, 3 sleepless weeks solving a foundation problem that would have sunk a lesser engineer. The one that bore my signature on 412 sheets of structural drawings. I picked up my water glass and took a sip. "Looks impressive," I said. And I left it there, hanging in the warm air of my parents' living room like a lit fuse. Kara found me in the hallway 10 minutes later. "Hey," she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the coat closet. "I need to ask you something." "What?" She held up her phone. On the screen was the website for Midwest Builder magazine, their annual Engineers to Watch feature. The cover photo showed a woman standing on a bridge deck in a hard hat and high-vis vest, the crooked river in the background. The woman was me. "That's you, Karevi Spirit. I've been staring at this for 20 minutes, that's you." I reached over and gently turned her phone face down against her palm. Not tonight. Claire, you're on the cover of a magazine. I know. You're the engineer on that bridge, the one Uncle David keeps. Oh my God, he doesn't know. Nobody here knows, and I want them to find out a specific way. She searched my face, trying to read the plan behind the calm. She was smart enough not to push. Okay, she said, your call. Thank you. She started to walk back toward the living room, then stopped. Can I at least be ready? Ready for what? She held up her phone again and tapped the camera icon. Just in case someone says something that deserves to be remembered. I looked at her for a long moment. Kara had spent every holiday sitting beside me at the kids' table, watching the same performances I watched, eating from the same paper plates. She knew what this family was capable of. She also knew what I was capable of, because she'd bothered to ask. Be ready, I said. She grinned and slipped back into the noise. I was heading back to the dining room when I heard Jenna's voice through the back door, sharp, hissing, the way people argue when they're trying not to be heard. Tell them it's next week, tell them anything, just buy us time. Ryan's reply was muffled, but the tone was clear. He was pleading. Through the glass pane in the back door, I could see them on the porch. Jenna had her coat pulled tight. Ryan was pacing. At one point he stopped and pressed both palms against his forehead, and I recognized the posture. It was the posture of someone doing math that doesn't resolve. Jenna jabbed a finger at him. Fix it, Ryan, I'm not telling your mother. They came back inside separately. Ryan went to the bathroom. Jenna poured herself another glass of wine with a smile that could have been painted on. My mother noticed. Everything okay? Perfect, Jenna said. Just work stuff. You know how Q4 is. I sure do. Ryan works so hard. She said it the way she always did, like a closing argument. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The cracks were already showing in the surface of the family's favorite story, and I wasn't the one holding the chisel. Later, when everything came out, I'd think about that moment on the porch, two people on the edge of a cliff, pretending the ground was solid. It wasn't so different from what my parents were doing, or what any of them were doing. The difference was that I'd stopped pretending 3 years ago and started pouring concrete instead. Truth has a way of finding its own schedule. I just had to wait for it to arrive. My mother sent me to the garage for extra folding chairs. The garage was cold and smelled like motor oil and sawdust, the ghost of my grandfather's workshop, which used to occupy the back half. The workbench was gone, replaced by shelving units full of plastic bins. But in the corner, shoved behind a stack of old tires, was a metal toolbox with W. Harrison stenciled on the lid in faded white paint. There was a strip of masking tape across the top, in my mother's handwriting, throw out. I knelt down and unlatched the clasps. Inside were the remnants of a 40-year career in ironwork, a chalkline reel, 2 cold chisels, a box of layout markers, a pair of spud wrenches worn smooth at the grips. Tools I'd watched him use 100 times. Under the top tray, taped to the inside of the lid, was a folded piece of paper, yellow with age, soft at the creases. I pulled it free and opened it. His handwriting, the same block print he used on structural drawings. Claire. Build it level, build it true. And never beg the people who couldn't see you. Grandpa. I read it twice, 3 times. I could hear his voice in the letters. He'd written this before he got sick, before the cancer took his appetite, then his hands, then the rest of him. He'd left it here, in the one place he knew I'd eventually look, because he'd known me better than anyone in this house ever had. I folded the note and put it in my coat pocket, next to the brass level. Then I grabbed the folding chairs and went back upstairs. From the kitchen, I could hear my mother talking about me. I stood on the basement stairs holding 2 folding chairs and listened to my mother explain me to her sister. I worry about her, Diane, Ido. She's 33 and she rents a 1-bedroom and drives that truck and she can't even tell us what she does all day. A pause. I grew up with nothing. I married David when I was 22 because I was tired of eating rice every night. Everything I have, I clawed for. She'll figure it out, Diane said. She won't, that's what scares me. I see her going backwards, and it makes me sick. I know what backwards looks like, I lived it. Cabinet opened, glasses clinked. So you push her, Diane said. Of course I push her. Love isn't soft, Diane. Soft is how you stay poor. And there it was. Not cruelty for cruelty's sake. Fear. The kind of fear that grows up in empty kitchens and never fully leaves, no matter how much food you put on the table. My mother wasn't trying to destroy me, she was trying to prevent what she imagined I was becoming, a version of the girl she'd been, broke, powerless, invisible. She was wrong about all of it. But standing on those stairs, holding cheap folding chairs in a cold garage, I understood her for the first time in years. Understanding didn't make it hurt less. It just made the hurt more specific. She needs a shock, my mother said, tonight, in front of everyone. Maybe if she's embarrassed enough, she'll finally do something. I set the chairs down quietly on the top step and waited until my heartbeat steadied. Then I carried them into the dining room like I hadn't heard a word. I sat back down in the folding chair and made a decision. I wasn't going to expose Ryan's debt. I wasn't going to embarrass Jenna. I wasn't going to confront my mother with what I'd just heard or throw my father's bluster back in his face. I wasn't going to do any of the things they would have done, because I'd spent 10 years watching them do those things to each other, and I knew exactly where it led. I was going to tell the truth about myself. Once. Calmly. Then leave. If the truth happened to reshape the room, if it turned the seating chart on its head, if it made the folding chair look different, if it put a crack in the story they'd been telling for a decade, that wasn't revenge. That was just what happens when someone stops hiding. I looked at the cedar box, still sitting in the wrapping paper pile where my mother had left it. Nobody had moved it, nobody had asked about it. It was the most patient object in the room. Kara, I said quietly. She looked up from her phone. When the time comes, don't stop me. Wouldn't dream of it. And whatever you're recording, that's yours. I won't ask for it. She nodded. Serious. Got it. I reached into my pocket and touched the brass level, then the note. The paper was soft and warm against my fingertips. Build it level, build it true. Okay, Grandpa. Here we go. Dessert was my mother's domain. She'd made 3 pies, pecan, pumpkin, cherry, and she served them with the precision of a general deploying troops. Ryan, Jenna, you're staying at the main table. Everyone else, find your spots. The folding chair again, same corner, same paper plate. I picked up my fork, then put it down. I'll sit at the table, I said. The room went still. There's no room, my mother said. There are 2 empty chairs, right there. I pointed at the far end of the main table where nobody had sat all evening. Those are for display. The table looks better full. They're empty chairs, Mom. I pulled one out and sat down. I didn't ask, I didn't argue. I just moved. My mother's face tightened. She looked at my father. He was chewing pie. Claire, she said. I'm sitting here. A beat of silence. Aunt Diane suddenly became very interested in her pecan pie. Uncle Mark's wife reached for the cream. The kids in the den didn't notice anything, because kids never do. Fine, my mother said. Her voice had the controlled brightness of a pilot reporting turbulence. Fine, sit wherever you like. But she adjusted her own chair so that her back was angled slightly away from me. Which was its own kind of seating chart. I ate my pie at the table for the first time in 6 Christmases. The china was heavier than I expected, the napkin was cloth. Small luxuries that were always 3 feet away and never offered. Kara slid into the folding chair I'd left empty, grinning. She propped her phone against her water glass, screen facing the table, recording light on. Kara was the kind of person who couldn't sit on a secret without developing a rash. By 8 o'clock, she'd already tried twice to steer the conversation toward the Langford project. Uncle David, did you see they finished the main span last month? The engineering on that thing is insane. Course I saw it, I've been following it closer than anyone. My father puffed up. That's my deal, Kara. Right, but did you look up who the lead engineer is? I kicked her under the table. She winced. Some firm out of Columbus, my father said. Keystone something, does it matter? The money's in the contracting. Keystone Structural Group, Kara said, looking straight at me. Kara. I said it quiet, final. She closed her mouth. But her hand moved to her phone, and she tapped the screen twice. I could see from the corner of my eye that she'd pulled up the Midwest Builder article, the one with my face on the cover. She held it under the table, tilted so only I could see. I shook my head. She put the phone down. Let them see it the right way, I whispered. And what's the right way? When they choose to look. They're never going to choose to look, Claire, that's the whole problem. She wasn't wrong. But I'd carried that box 4 hours, I'd sat in that folding chair, I'd eaten off a paper plate, I'd listened to my mother plan my public shaming on the stairs. If this was going to end, it was going to end on my terms. My father leaned back. All right, let's finish the presents, that wooden box, too, I guess, might as well get it over with. My mother reached for the cedar box. She held it the way you hold a bag someone's handed you on the subway, with 2 fingers, at arm's length, already deciding it's not worth keeping. She turned it over, shook it gently. Something shifted inside, a soft, papery sound. Light, she said. Open it, I said. She wrinkled her nose. I know what homemade gifts look like, Claire. It's probably a candle, or a photo collage. She set it back down. Save us the embarrassment. It's not a candle. It doesn't matter what it is, the point is. She looked around the table, gathering her audience the way she always did before delivering a verdict. The point is that you show up here every year with nothing to show for yourself. No house, no husband, no career anyone can see, and then you hand us a little wooden box like that's supposed to mean something. I watched her push the box toward the center of the table, next to the torn wrapping paper and ribbon scraps. The cedar caught the candlelight and glowed, the grain I'd sanded for hours, the brass hinges I'd installed with my grandfather's tools, the linseed oil I'd rubbed in 3 coats. She pushed it like it was someone else's garbage. "Mom," I said, "open the box." "I don't need to open the box." The room was watching, 23 people, and not one of them spoke. The only sound was the television still murmuring in the next room, and somewhere beneath it, the faint creak of Kara's chair as she adjusted the angle of her phone. I leaned back and waited for my father to say what I already knew he was going to say. My mother turned to the table and delivered the line she'd been rehearsing on those stairs. "This is what I mean," she said. She gestured at me with one hand, the other resting on the cedar box like it was evidence. 33 years old, renting, divorced, can't explain her job, drives a truck that looks like it belongs to a day laborer, and she brings us this craft project, and expects us to clap. She paused, looked around the room. When is she going to stop living off other people? When is she going to stand on her own 2 feet? Then, louder, to make sure the cousins in the back heard. A freeloader who can't even live on her own. The word landed like a slap. Freeloader. Not the first time she'd said it, but the first time she'd said it to a room. The first time she'd planted her flag in it publicly, in front of every aunt and uncle and cousin and neighbor's kid who'd wandered in. Nobody said a word. Diane studied the ceiling, Mark's wife pressed her lips together, even Ryan looked at his plate. Under the table, Kara's hand found mine and squeezed once. I let the silence sit. I'd learned that from my grandfather. He used to say silence was structural, it held weight if you let it. Most people rushed to fill it. I didn't. 5 seconds, 10. My mother crossed her arms, satisfied. She thought she'd won something. She thought the quiet was agreement. She didn't know it was a foundation. And she was standing on the wrong side of it. I looked at the cedar box sitting between us on the table. And I waited for my father to finish the job. My father set his bourbon down. He'd been quiet through my mother's speech, not because he disagreed, but because he was waiting for his turn. David Donovan never let anyone else have the last word. It was the one skill he'd kept from his sales career. He picked up the cedar box with one hand and pushed it across the table toward me. It slid over the cloth and stopped against my water glass. The brass hinges caught the light. "We don't need your cheap gift," he said, "take it and get out." 11 words. He said them flat, like he was returning a defective product. No anger, no heat. Just a man who decided his daughter wasn't worth the space she occupied at his table. Ryan opened his mouth. I saw it. His lips parted, and for half a second he looked like he was going to say something, to object, to deflect, to do what he'd done earlier when Mom brought up Colin. Then Jenna touched his arm. He closed his mouth and looked away. The room held its breath. Aunt Diane's hand was frozen over her coffee cup. Uncle Mark's wife had her eyes shut. One of the kids poked a head around the doorframe, sensed the weather, and disappeared. I looked at the box in front of me. The box I'd built from cedar in my dead grandfather's workshop with tools he'd left for me. The box that contained 2 things my parents wanted more than anything in the world, if they'd only bothered to open it. I picked it up. And I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a mean one. A real laugh. The kind that comes from the chest when something is finally, completely, absurdly clear. Everyone stared. My mother's arms tightened across her chest, my father's face reddened, Ryan's hand moved to his whiskey glass and froze there. I stood up slowly, held the cedar box in both hands. My voice was steady, the same voice I used on job sites when there was a problem and 20 people were waiting for direction. "Before I go," I said, "I have one question." I set the box on the table right where my father had pushed it from. "Dad, that deal you've been chasing with Hartwell Industries on the Langford project, did they ever tell you who the structural engineer of record is?" His face went blank. "What? The engineer, the person whose firm designed the bridge, the one who signs off on every subcontractor, did you ever ask?" I don't deal with the engineering side." "Maybe you should have." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my grandfather's brass pocket level, 4 inches of solid brass, worn smooth from 40 years of ironwork. I set it on the table next to the cedar box. "Grandpa gave me this when I was 17, I said, He told me to build things, so I did. I flipped open the lid of the cedar box. The room went quiet, a different quiet this time, not the embarrassed silence from before. This was the silence of a room catching up. You keep saying my job isn't real, I said. I lifted the first thing from the box, a glossy magazine, folded open to the cover. Let's test that. I held it up so the table could see. My face in a hard hat on the cover of Midwest Builder. The headline underneath, 2023 engineers to watch. My father's glass tipped over. Nobody moved to clean it up. Keystone Structural Group, I read aloud. Principal and founder, Claire Donovan, lead structural engineer, Langford Bridge and Civic Pavilion. I let the sentence land. Then I reached back into the box and pulled out 2 heavy stock envelopes, embossed with the Hartwell Industries logo and the county seal. These are invitations to the dedication gala on New Year's Eve, 2 seats, front row. They're not available to the public, they're not available to contractors, they're issued by the engineer of record, which is me, to the people she wants in the room. I held them up. I drove 4 hours to give these to you. I built this box by hand in Grandpa Walt's workshop with his tools because I wanted the gift to mean something. I wanted to bring you into the room everyone in this family has been trying to get into. My mother's face had gone white, her mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. My father stared at the magazine, then at the envelopes, then at the television, still showing the Langford rendering in the next room. The color drained from his face as the math arrived. The project he'd been chasing for 6 months, the deal he'd bragged about at this table 2 hours ago, the subcontractor slot he needed. All ran through the desk of the woman he'd just told to take her cheap gift and get out. Jenna reached for the envelopes. I pulled them back. The gala, she whispered, those are gala tickets? The ones she'd promised the family she could get, the ones she couldn't. I held up the card I'd written by hand and read it to the room. I built the bridge everyone's talking about, I wanted you in the front row. My mother recovered first, that was her talent, she could pivot faster than anyone I'd ever met. Why didn't you tell us? Her voice cracked, and for a moment it almost sounded like real emotion. All this time? Why would you hide something like this from your own family? I didn't hide it, Mom, I told you, 3 times over the past 4 years. You changed the subject every single time. That's not, I would have remembered. You told me to pass the roles. Well, you should have been more clear. Her voice was rising now, the rehearsed composure was cracking, and underneath it was the thing she always fell back on, offense. After everything we've done for you, you let us look like fools? You sat here all night and let your father embarrass himself in front of the whole family. Dad embarrassed himself, I said quietly, I just watched. My father's fist hit the table, glasses rattled. Enough, he said, you should have told me about Hartwell. I've been working that deal for months. You should have. I should have what? Called your bluff? You told me to take my cheap gift and get out. I'm taking it, and getting out. Claire, you can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you, I'm just not hiding anymore. The room watched, 23 sets of eyes. Aunt Diane's mouth was open, Mark's wife had tears streaming down her face, though I doubted she could have explained why. The kids had come back to the doorframe, sensing the electricity. My mother's face was red, her hands were shaking. My father was gripping the edge of the table. And I was calm. I closed the cedar box and picked it up. These tickets were a gift, I said, they were my way of saying, here, come see what I built, sit in the front row, be proud if you can. I tucked the envelopes back inside and shut the lid. But you've told me all night who I am, a freeloader, someone who can't stand on her own. Someone whose homemade gift isn't a real present, so I'll honor that. Claire, wait, my mother started. These seats will go to people who believed in me before there was a bridge to look at. Grandpa Walt's union brothers, the ones who used to bring casseroles to our door when Dad was between jobs, remember them? They never called anyone a freeloader. The mention of my grandfather's name hit the room like a temperature drop. My father flinched. He'd spent the years since Grandpa Walt's death slowly erasing the old man from the house, the workshop cleared out. The tools boxed up for disposal, the stories left untold. I'm done auditioning for a family that already cast me, I said. I don't need you to understand my work, I don't need you to be impressed. I just needed to see if you could open a box from your daughter without turning it into a trial, and now I know. I turned to Ryan. He was staring at his hands, jaw tight. I didn't mention his debt, I didn't mention Jenna's promises. I didn't need to. Merry Christmas, I said. I picked up my coat. I put the brass level back in my pocket, I held the cedar box against my chest. Then I walked to the door. And I didn't rush. The folding chair was still sitting at the edge of the room, empty. I looked at it on my way past, the metal frame, the vinyl seat, The position it occupied at the border between the kids' table and the adults' world. 6 Christmases in that chair, 6 years of paper plates and plastic forks while everyone else ate off the good china. I left it where it was. They could stare at it all night. Kara was already at the door. She had her coat on and her phone in her hand, recording light steady. She didn't say anything. She just opened the door and walked out with me. The cold hit my face like a reset button. December in Ohio, 22 degrees, wind off the river, the kind of night that clears your head whether you want it cleared or not. We were halfway to my truck when I heard the front door open behind us. Claire. My father's voice, smaller than I'd ever heard it. Claire, wait, let's talk about this. I didn't turn around. I opened the truck door and set the cedar box on the passenger seat, the same spot it had ridden that morning. Claire, please. I climbed in, started the engine, let it idle while the heater kicked on. Kara was in the passenger seat of her own car, watching me through the windshield with a look that was half pride and half grief. I pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I could see my father standing on the porch in his dress shirt, no coat, arms at his sides. He was still standing there when I turned the corner and he disappeared. 48 hours later, my phone started ringing. It didn't stop for a week. Kara posted the video the next morning. Not on social media, she wasn't that reckless. She sent it to the family group chat, all 41 members, no caption, just a clip she'd trimmed to the confrontation. My mother calling me a freeloader, my father pushing the box, me standing up, calm, reading the magazine headline, the invitations, the silence, me walking out. A few minutes of footage that rewrote the family story in real time. Aunt Diane called me at 7 a.m. Claire, honey, I had no idea, your grandfather would be so proud. Then Uncle Mark. We drove past that bridge last week. That's you? That's really you? Then cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, one by one, like dominoes. Text messages, voicemails, Facebook messages from people I barely remembered. The video worked its way through the extended family like a weather system. By the afternoon, it had reached the second ring, my father's old colleagues, church friends, neighbors. Aunt Diane, true to form, had shared it with everyone she'd ever met. She wasn't trying to hurt my parents, she was trying to brag about the family, and the math of the video was too good to resist. Humble niece, magnificent bridge, ungrateful parents, Christmas dinner disaster. By evening, the phone calls to my parents had started. From their perspective, the worst part wasn't the video itself, it was the fact that every person who saw it asked the same question. You kicked out the woman who built the bridge? That question, repeated 40, 50, 60 times, was the thing that cracked them. The fact that it was their own family asking made it structural. On December 27th, my father received an email from Hartwell Industries. He'd been pursuing a subcontractor position for 6 months. He'd made calls, sent bids, attended 2 mixers, bought a new sport coat for the occasion. The Langford project was going to be his comeback, the thing that proved David Donovan still had it. The email was 3 sentences. Thank you for your interest. After review, we've decided to move in a different direction for the finishing package. We wish you well. He called the project office. The receptionist was polite. She transferred him to the procurement manager, who explained that his application had been flagged at the bonding and insurance screening stage, before it ever reached the technical review panel. His liability coverage was below the project minimum, his surety bond had lapsed. The bid never made it past the first gate. I found out about the email 2 days later from Kara. I hadn't contacted Hartwell, I'd recused myself from all subcontractor reviews months earlier, standard practice when you know people in the bidding pool, and I'd flagged the potential conflict the day I saw his company name on the applicant list. I hadn't done anything at all. I didn't need to. The truth was simpler and sharper than revenge. My father's bid wasn't competitive, his firm was undercapitalized, his insurance was thin, his references were 5 years old. He'd been relying on personality to close a deal that required paperwork. And the paperwork didn't lie. The Langford project didn't reject David Donovan because his daughter was the engineer. It rejected him because he wasn't qualified. The fact that his daughter was the engineer just made the rejection impossible to explain away. He'd told 23 people at Christmas dinner that this deal was his. Now it wasn't. And every one of those 23 people knew why. I didn't need to do anything. They'd built the house, I just didn't stop the weather. Ryan showed up at my apartment on the 29th. No Tesla, he was driving Jenna's Honda. He looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days, which he probably hadn't. I let him in, made coffee, didn't say anything, because I'd learned that silence was the fastest way to the truth. He sat at my kitchen table and stared at his hands. The boat was a lie, he said. The Q4 numbers were a lie. I've been borrowing from mom and dad for 8 months. Jenna and I are in over 200,000, and the company's about to fold. He looked up, his eyes were red. I clapped for myself so no one would check my math. I let that sit. The gala, he said. Jenna told everyone she could get tickets. She couldn't. She was hoping to work a connection through Dad's Hartwell deal, which, he trailed off. Which went through me, I said. Yeah. You knew? I didn't know the details, but I knew you weren't a freeloader, Claire. I've always known. I was too busy drowning to say it. There was something painful about watching my older brother admit that his applause was armor. He wasn't evil. He wasn't even particularly selfish, not at the core. He was a man who'd been handed a script and performed it until the performance consumed him. But he'd sat at that table while our mother called me a freeloader and our father told me to get out. And he'd closed his mouth when it mattered. I can't bail you out, Ryan, that's not what this is. I know. I'm not your exit, I'm just your sister. He nodded, finished his coffee, and left without asking for anything, which was the most honest thing he'd done in years. My mother called 7 times on December 30th. I let 6 go to voicemail. The first message was angry. I hope you're happy. Your father hasn't eaten in 2 days. The whole family is talking. This is what you wanted, isn't it? The second was bargaining. We can still fix this. Just call Hartwell and put in a word for your father. That's all we're asking. The third was something closer to real. I was scared, Claire. I've always been scared for you. I know I said it wrong. By the fourth, she was crying. Just give us 1 ticket. 1. I'll sit in the back. I won't say a word. The fifth was my father. I made a mistake. I see that now. But you're our daughter. You can't cut us off. Talk to me. The sixth was my mother again. We're still your family, Claire. That has to count for something. I listened to all of them, sitting at my kitchen table with the cedar box in front of me. The box was empty now. I'd taken out the magazine and the invitations and the card. The box was just a box, cedar and brass, handmade, lighter than it had been. On the 7th call, I picked up. Mom. Claire, thank God, listen to me. I'm going to say this once. I'm not angry. I'm not trying to punish you. The tickets go to Grandpa Walt's people, the Union brothers, Tom Kessler and Hank DeWitt. They believed in me when it cost them nothing, and they never asked for proof. Silence. Your father needs that Hartwell connection, Claire, he needs it. My work stands on its own, Mom, so do I. That's what I was trying to show you. What do you want from us? My mother asked. Her voice was thin, stripped of the performance. I want you to see me. I've been here the whole time. I built a company. I designed a bridge. I made you a gift with my own hands, and you set it aside because it didn't look expensive enough to count. I didn't know. You didn't ask. That's not the same thing as not knowing. I could hear my father in the background, murmuring something I couldn't make out. Mom, I'm not closing the door, but I'm done fitting through the one you've been offering. No more folding chairs, no more paper plates, no more explaining myself to people who've already decided I'm not enough. Claire, if you want to be part of my life, it starts with respect, real respect, not the kind you give when someone shows you a magazine cover, the kind you give when someone shows up with a wooden box and you just say thank you. She was quiet for a long time. I could hear her breathing. I don't know how to do this differently, she said. I know, that's what makes this hard. I hung up. Not in anger, in clarity. There's a difference. Anger slams the phone, clarity sets it down gently and doesn't pick it up again for a while. I pulled my grandfather's note from my pocket and read it one more time. Build it level, build it true, and never beg the people who couldn't see you. I'd done all 3. The bridge was level, the truth was out, and I was done begging. The Langford Bridge opened on New Year's Eve under a sky so clear you could see the stars above the floodlights. The mayor gave a speech, the county commissioner cut the ribbon, 300 people walked across the bridge for the first time while a local jazz quartet played on the observation platform. The river below was black and silver, and the concrete pylons I designed stood in it like monuments. I gave a short keynote, 6 minutes. I talked about my grandfather, who'd spent his life building things for people he'd never meet. I talked about what it means to put your name on a structure that will outlast you. I didn't talk about my family. In the front row, Tom Kessler and Hank DeWitt, my grandfather's Union brothers, both in their 70s, both in borrowed sport coats. Tom was crying before I finished the first sentence. Hank just sat there nodding, the way ironworkers do when something is plumb. Halfway through my speech, I put my hand in my pocket and touched the brass level. It was warm. There were 2 empty seats in the second row. I'd reserved them under my parents' names, just in case. They didn't come. I found out later that my mother had driven to the bridge that afternoon, alone, and sat in her car in the parking lot for an hour before driving home. I didn't look at the empty seats. I looked at the bridge. My bridge. Build it level, build it true. I did, Grandpa. I did. My parents and I talk now. Not often, and not easily. We're learning a new language, the kind that doesn't include folding chairs or paper plates. My mother hasn't called me a freeloader since Christmas. My father hasn't mentioned Hartwell. I left the door open, but on my terms. Respect first, proof, never. Ryan filed for bankruptcy in February. He's selling the Tesla. He and I meet for coffee sometimes. We don't talk about the money, we talk about Grandpa. Lupe, resolved. The cedar box sits on my desk now, empty. A reminder that the most valuable gifts are the ones that cost you something to make, and nothing to prove. Loop B, resolve. My grandfather's workshop isn't gone. I bought the property from my parents last spring. The first thing I did was remove the masking tape that said throw out. The second thing I did was rebuild the workbench. Loop C, resolve. The mistake I made wasn't building the bridge or starting the company or leaving the marriage. The mistake was thinking I needed their permission to exist in the first place. I'd been carrying that for 3 years. I set it down the night I walked out that door. You don't owe the people who measured you in dollars the proof that you were always worth more. You just owe yourself the clarity to stop asking. I stopped asking. And the bridge still stands.